let's get underway. Thanks for being here again. So got a bunch of things to share with you today. And we'll start by first doing our normal protocol of just checking where people are in stride. Then I want to share some new developments with you around the webinars. And then we'll get into the topic that's on today, which is, finding your passion. And I'd like to welcome you all here. I know we have a bunch of new people here today, or new to the webinar. Some of you have been familiar with ID for a long time, but it's nice to see you come along today. So we have a protocol that was really part of what kicked these webinars off, which was when at the beginning of COVID, the challenges and the fear and the uncertainty that everyone faced. The whole purpose of these was helping people stay in stride, notwithstanding all of those challenges. We often hear people say things like, well, I'm not on my game right now, but I've got these other things going on, that are pulling me out of stride. And the real challenge, the more you learn about your ID, the real insight that it gives you is actually how to navigate some of those challenges from a place of still being at your very best and bringing your best self to the game each and every time. And the ID is really the key to that. So we have a little model, which I'll show you on a screen here, called the Peak Performance Indicator. And it looks like this. And it represents you in stride. So when you are traveling life in a way that's true to your ID, you're basically on this green arrow. And then when you operate that way, you not only get the joy of life in terms of giving your best performance, being fulfilled, a great sense of achievement, and your confidence and energy and health is at its best, but you also avoid various forms of stress and distress that agonize people's lives at times. Equally, when you are pulled out of stride, there are various forces in life that pull us off track, then you get compromised from meeting or enjoying the things at the top of the chart here, and you start to experience, depending on how far you pulled out of stride and for how long, various levels of stress that could be anything from just emotional and attitude, temper, that type of thing, swearing, but motivation as well, like procrastination or sleeping in. And eventually it gets more intense and it starts to take its toll on your health, and ultimately to the point where it can be really quite serious, that whether it's physical or mental, often it's without medication, you could be in a really disastrous sort of place. And those of us who have been involved with ID over the years and have worked with people in various, realms, we have helped people who have been on medication for all sorts of stress as they've learnt more about how to be true to themselves, not by our guidance, but just by the confidence that they get in themselves. They've found that life improves dramatically to the point where they'll even either reduce or eliminate various medications or ailments from their life, and sometimes that includes relationship changes, because sometimes it's not just the stress of the role, it could be the relationship that is pulling you way out of sorts with, you being in stride and the other person not wanting you to be that way. So what we do at the start of each of our webinars is just check in to say, how are you traveling this week? On a scale of 0 to 10, if 10 is you absolutely on fire, you're in stride, you're, like we're going to talk about today, living with passion and purpose and a lot of fulfillment, and a 1 out of 10 is you pulled way to the left or way to the right, where are you today? And some of you find it easy to put a number down. You might want to put it in the chat. Some of you prefer to just use a description, yeah, I'm really on fire, or whatever you might want to, I'm good, or I'm in stride, or I'm out of stride. You don't necessarily need to rate it. We find that that's often the case for verifiers, but you can see here with Gail as the avoid verifier, she's, still fine. Greg, you're a 10, but freezing cold. That's cool. Maybe that's what you need, Greg, to be a 10, outside in the cold, the snow, that's what it is. So just put your score down there, and it's just a very quick way. And I'd really recommend this to you as a protocol in your teams, for those of you who belong to a team, or even in your family. It's what is called a common language that people start to speak. So you just say to someone, hey, what's your number today? Are you looking a bit flat, or I'm concerned about our relationship. What number are you in it? Someone says, I'm a 7, or I'm a 10, or I'm a, whatever the score is. It's a simple little way of just checking in and knowing where you're at. When leaders do this with their teams, it's probably one of the most profound check-ins they do, to get a sense of the overall energy of the team, but also where their outliers are. If you've got people showing up as a 9 or 10, It's like, that is awesome. What have you done to get there? And if you've got someone who's a 4, 3, 2, or a 1, I will tell you on my experience, and I'm just checking the scores here, anyone who is a 4 or less is a flight risk, meaning they're ready to move. So whether that's, if you think back to yourself in a role or a relationship, when you made a change, you just think, that role you're in or that relationship you're in, what would you have said your number was right before you made the change? I'll almost guarantee you it was 4 or less. And the good thing about a really low score like that is normally the frustration is so strong that you really want to do something about it, or not even want to, you're compelled to do something about it. Whereas when you sit at what I would call a fairly comfortable level, like people who are 7s, well, so that's a pretty good score. It resonates with a credit at university and so on, but it's a good score. But it's a good score. It's not necessarily projecting energy and passion and the influence that as a leader, you do want to cast across the people that you are leading, your followership. The place you want to be is an 8, 9, or 10. And you want to be that for yourself, to show up and give you the best you that you can to everyone around you. But particularly when you're in a role of leadership, which includes parenting and in a relationship, I feel like, you owe it to the people around you to give them the best you that you can give. And we only live this life once. So we want to show up that way too. So you can see on this particular meeting where most of you are into self-development, and we are human. So some of us do get pulled off track from time to time. But those of you who attend regularly will know that the scores that show up here are typically pretty high and normally in the 8s and above. And that's, I think, a testimony to the work that you all do and the focus you have on developing yourselves. That is not what we find when we work with other teams. The average score is normally 6.3, and with, outliers in both cases, like up and down. So I just thought, for those of you who are new, it'd be good to have the context of this and for you to contemplate using this tool more regularly. It's something I think about every day. When I'm getting ready for work and I'm dressed and I feel like, okay, I'm ready to go, I guess I've just built the habit of saying to myself, what's my number? And if I don't feel a 9 or a 10, I generally change something. Often it's what I'm wearing or the way I might be going to start my day and what I'm doing from a task. But I think about, what do I need to do to get that number to a high score? Normally I'm in front of people and I want to project the best me that I can. And I think it's a great way to, reflect on yourself and just check in with yourself and with others. Okay, enough from me. Does anyone have anything they would like to firstly share about their number? Just as a general comment, anyone dying to share something, particularly if you got a particularly high score or a score where you're feeling pulled right out of stride? So one of the things I would ask you is, for those of you who do have a good score or where you feel like your score has really shifted in the last few weeks, has there been something that you've consciously done that you can see maps to your ID that you could share with the team? Because often it's not about just having a really good score, that you don't want to get there by accident or chance, but it's particularly valuable when you know what you need to do to get in stride and to stay there. And I'm curious if anyone has done something intentionally that they're aware of over the last few weeks to get to a really good score.
May I, Paul?
Sure, go, Catherine.
So it was last week and I was feeling very flat, had very little get up and go, and physically I was fine, but in my spirit I was very flat and I couldn't figure it out. The answer didn't come to me. I kept wandering around asking myself and I didn't know the answer, I thought. And so I just stopped. And what I realized was, because of some deadlines I'd agreed to as part of a program, I was very much shooting on myself. And I know for me that shoulds are just a no-go zone. I have found they are always someone else's agenda. And I was being sucked in and dragged to comply with a whole framework of you should do this. And it had absolutely drained my energy. And when I realized that and just went, I will do what I know works for me, which is much more spontaneity and even a little bit of rebellion and non-compliance. And I was right back up there within hours. So I found that very interesting from a clear awareness perspective.
Good, good. Well done. Well done. Good for you and good for the people around you. Jose, you kill me. I just saw what you're wearing. Anybody else got something I'd like to share? Okay, well, because of what else we've got planned today, I'm going to keep moving. But please know, for those of you who are new, this is an incredibly insightful tool for people, particularly if you're in a team. So one of the things I did want to talk to you about are some changes we're making to the webinar format. So the webinars have been, this is webinar 64. We started this back in March and we've run them pretty much ever since. And if I've not been able to make a couple of them, I've leaned on my really good friend, who most of you come to know, Greg Meyer, to run them. And together we've made sure they've run the whole way through, other than for the Christmas break. And I mean, they've been an incredible amount of fun. And for me personally, very energizing, and learned a ton, developed some new insights and material from it. They've been really valuable. And I know they've been really helpful to a lot of you. But I never stop with my ID being a strong verifier. I'm always looking at how I can keep improving them. And, you know, and I listen to the feedback, I reach out for the feedback, and I'm always discussing how do we make them bigger and better and get more reach. And I've also, in the last year, I've been working closely with a marketing agency. We've appointed a marketing leader, Jim Parry, and we've engaged this marketing agency. And one of the tasks I've given them is how we can have, you know, much more traffic coming to our webinars, making them more significant in terms of the value that they generate and the appeal that they have to the broader audience across our database. And one of the things that we can see is that we need and want to put more energy into the promotion of each of the webinars. And to do it weekly, it's too much of a rhythm. It means that if we were going to have someone next week and we were promoting this week, I know it's going to cause confusion, you know. So to work on a 2-weekly sort of lead up to each webinar, it means we've got to shift the cadence of our webinars. And so what we've done is design a new format. I'll show you the slide so that you can see it. And this is going to, you know, evolve over the coming weeks. So I'll just show it to you here. So what we've done, first of all, is we've chosen down the left-hand column here is a format for the webinars, and then we have a topic that's going to be the theme of each month that we'll unpack. So take, for example, the month of July, where we've got the where we've got finding your passion as the theme. This is what we call a living in stride webinar, and this will be, you know, where we just share a bunch of insightful perspectives about the topic and show you the link to ID. But then and that's for the entire ID database. So we invite everyone that's ever done their ID to come along to these webinars. And then we move, and it will be every 2 weeks, into a masterclass. And that's for those of you, typically it's you people on this call that love diving in a bit deeper and also, you know, belonging to a community and of people that are sort of like-minded in this space, but we can really unpack how your ID works with this. So instead of us talking generically about finding your passion, when we do this next week, this is going to be us digging into, and how do you do that as a, you know, 7454 or a 3429, or, you know, we'll get quite specific so that it really hones in for you on your ID. One of the topics that some of you have experienced before is the game changer interviews. And that's when I find somebody who has really done something game changing in their field that's linked to one of these topics, and that they've done it from a place of being authentic and in stride with their ID. Then I invite those people to come and be a part of our webinar and turn that into a, you know, podcast product as well. And then I'm opening up, and what I'm struggling with is finding people like that have really got a great message on topic each and every time. And then, but what we do find is there are a lot of people that aren't necessarily, you know, well known or that visible in what they're doing, but they've got a really cool ID story, you know, and when I say ID, I mean something they've done in their life where the ID has been really insightful. And I know from listening to them that their story could be incredibly helpful and insightful to other people. And we call that, and Greg, this is from the conversation you and I had there probably a couple of months ago now, you know, just letting the rest of the world hear about some of those really cool stories. And some of those we'll do in the webinar. I've actually got so many of those that we wouldn't get through them doing them just in the webinars. So with some people, who, by the way, aren't always on a time zone that can fit these as well, I'm just going to do the interview myself with them and record them, you know, and then we can publish them or post them as a product on YouTube and make them available to you. So we've chosen different topics for the next few months. And then in terms of today, we're talking about finding your passion and purpose. Next week is when we do the deep dive in the masterclass. And then, as I mentioned in the email that we promoted, on the 29th, this lady, Lauren Lewis, you're just going to love Lauren. What she's done is incredible, but she's one of these people that didn't know what she was doing was incredible. She just did it. And she's a wonderful person. She's going to probably talk about both how it's helped in her marriage and family, as well as how it's helped her entrepreneurially. But that will be a really fun experience. And then in August, when we move into leadership, I've been very blessed to have Frank Katsudis, who's the head of HR for Cisco Systems over in the Silicon Valley, who's a good friend of mine and someone who I've actually watched go from being a manager about 22 years ago all the way to, you can't get much more senior in, you know, the people space in big business than running the HR function for Cisco. What she's doing outside of Cisco with some incredible people over in Washington and just worldwide and with countries. I mean, she's the executive sponsor of Africa, for example, what she's doing to develop and the leadership she's showing with some of these different areas is just super inspiring. And I feel really honored that she's willing to come along and speak to our group around how she uses and how the insights of her ID help her in that space. So that should be a really huge opportunity for us. And then we will build from there in terms of who we plug in. I have a roster of people that I'm talking to now to sort of plug in for different dates. And then the marketing firm will build up the marketing energy promoting, you know, this schedule as we move through the rest of the year. So what will happen is we have the next meeting next week. So that's our weekly rhythm. And then we'll move to the 2 weekly rhythm. So we'll meet on the 29th and then it'll be the 12th and the 26th, the 9th and the 23rd, 7th and 21st, and so on. And then we'll obviously have a break over the Christmas period. Does anyone have any questions about that?
So the third week is being eliminated.
Correct. Well, doing it every week has been eliminated and it will move to a bi-weekly rhythm after next week.
What do we happen? What happens if we have a fifth week? Once in a while, we have a fifth week.
Well, we've already accounted for that for the next few months, Judy, okay. And we'll publish the dates when we get beyond. So what we're doing is just doing it every second week. So that's why you can see it's getting earlier in the month as we go through from the 23rd down to the 16th. That's because we're not doing it strictly just on the months. It does work out for the next 6 months. And I think by the time we restructure this for January, given that we have a break in January, it'll probably fall back in line again. So we haven't let that get in the way. It's just literally every second week. And a lot of that was so that we wouldn't cause confusion, that people just know, you know, week on, week off, week on, week off, for those of you who are the regular attendees. We will publish this when we send out the recording later. I'll make sure Ian has this to send to you so that you can jot the dates down, those of you who want to know about them. Okay, no other questions? We'll keep testing it. You know, I'm always interested in your feedback. If you've got other suggestions for the topics, please don't take them as locked in stone. If someone had something that was really compelling, or we found that with the way the world is pivoting right now, you've got to be fairly agile. By the time we get to December, there might be a topic that comes up that is more relevant to the group. We'll consider that. So if there's something on your mind that you'd like us to dig into and sort of unpack for the month, so have a general conversation around sharing insights and then do a deeper dive, please put it up. I'd love to hear from you. And even if it doesn't fit for this year, it's something we could then consider again for next year. And some of these topics are timeless. I mean, we could do the discussion on passion and purpose. We could easily do again, next year. The same with leadership. Learning difficulties, we could probably do every month. I've had a number of people talk to me about that one. The future of work's a big topic. Growth mindset, there's a number of angles we can take there. So it's very easy for us to, continue the discussion on any of these. All right, nothing else? Okay, let's move into the topic of passion today. So the place I want to start with passion, and I would like this to be a discussion. Some of you have had as much experience as me in this field in terms of helping people and what your own experiences have been. But the place I'd like to start is to differentiate between finding your passion as a thing. There are people that talk about passion being like, I want to find my niche in life, when what they're really asking for is, I want to be more passionate. I want to live with passion. I feel like my life is flat and I want more excitement, more energy, more animation. I want to come from a more significant place. Often they don't mean the thing of passion. They mean a way of life, of how they're living. And I think for you, as you reflect on how this might interest you today, think about that. Now it might be both. It's not necessarily either or, but it might be that you are interested in how your ID could help you find a particular passion. But I think there's a lot to be said for living with passion and being passionate. And that doesn't mean you've got to be animated and extroverted and, very obviously operating that way. There are a lot of people who are much more humble, more introverted, but they still feel that fire inside them that is living with passion. And I would start by saying, and the reason I've left a slide up on the peak performance indicator, it's pretty hard to find your passion and live with passion if you're not in stride. It starts right there. The very first thing I'd recommend to any of you who are wanting to do this or to help someone else, if you're thinking about this for a partner or for your children, the first step is, are they even in stride? Get to that place. I was in preparing for this topic, I've talked to a number of people about who I consider to be passionate and living their passion. And I mean, this just came up as a common denominator of get in stride first. When you are an 8, 9, or 10, it's pretty hard not to live with passion. And when you operate that way, there are many things that you could have at one point seen as a job or a task that you convert, and you can do them and see them as something that you have a lot more passion, in. So that would be my first step for all of you generically. And the way to do that, and those of you who have been on these webinars have seen some of the resources available, but we have a lot of tools that talk about your needs with each ID and how by meeting your needs, it helps you get back in stride and travel life on this green arrow here, where you're very, very much operating true to yourself. So that would be my first recommendation to you. And then I'll stop there in case anyone has any questions. And I have about three or four other insights to give you on finding your passion as well. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Paul, that something just went, when you hear something which feels like an absolute truth, when you just said that passion is not a thing specifically, but perhaps it's a way of life, I just went, booyah, that like really, really resonated. I love that. So you've just given me a new way of seeing the day.
Thank you, Angela. Well, I find that a lot when people ask me about it, because I guess, they sort of see me as living with a fair bit of passion, and I've had the privilege of actually knowing my life purpose and having a lot of passion around it from the time I was 19. So, and it's literally been in my, whole being every day of my life ever since, which is, 40 years ago now. So it's a long time to have lived that way, which I feel incredibly blessed to have. It's the thing I've said to my kids, the one goal that I've always had for them was to be able to live your life without an alarm clock, that you get out of bed every morning just with the zest for life, rather than that sense of obligation of, I've got to go and do a job today, And so but when I talk to people, so often what they're really wanting to do is get more in stride. They don't realize that's what it is, you know, but they're really wanting to find a place that's much more on fire, living with passion, as opposed to the niche of, I think my passion is photography, or I think my passion is science.
Yeah.
My passion is being a dentist, you know? Yeah, that's I think probably even more often the case than finding the niche piece. But I think there are still, you know, if you can find both, as I feel blessed to have found, for some people, I might say it's teaching. They've got an absolute passion around teaching or working with children or animals, or, you know, but that's, we'll get into that in a minute. But I think so often it's, even if you're into animals and working with kids and so on, there's still out there. I know if I was washing the car, or, you know, washing up, whatever it might be, there's still a way to do that with passion, or a way to do it that's really bland. And I'd much rather approach life in a more enthusiastic way.
I'm with you.
The word that comes to me, Paul, is the word fulfilled.
Yeah.
You know, whatever the activity is, if we can look at times when we feel fulfilled or satisfied, or, oh, that was great, oh, it feels so great about doing that, that could give more insight. Because I feel there's a lot of people, even more so than before the pandemic, who are now looking for their purpose, or what causes them to feel more passionate about life. A lot of that going on right now.
Well, when you think about people who have, you know, the classic midlife crisis, you know, so many of us, I know people, in fact, I've thought about having this guy talk. He's on my list for one of our untold stories. He chose a university degree because it had the shortest queue. You know, like his father was hammering him to go to university. So when he went there to get the monkey off his back, he just said, well, that's the shortest queue. I'll go there, which happened to be accounting, you know. And so we often do roles because we got a great mark in our high school grades, or because our father and our grandfather did something, or our mother and our grandmother, or, you know, a friend said, and we tend to react to, many of us fall into a path of life. And then, you know, you meet somebody and you're getting married or having children or whatever, and it tends to be reactive. And it's only sort of 20 years later when people typically call it a midlife crisis, where some people stop and do some type of stock take to say, is this really the life I want? You know, how's life working for me? How's my relationship working? How's my role working? How's where I live working? Friendships, you know, and people change stuff up. It's not really that it's the crisis of, you know, what happens in your 40s. It's just that moment when they decide to make life their design, rather than what's often called a second-hand life, you know, like a life that you just inherited from reacting to what's around you. And when that's the case, you know, that's when it often comes out for people. They want to find their passion and their purpose. But really, it's the sooner you can do that, back as a teenager or someone in their early adult life. And I think those of us who are parents listening today, this is where this can be really helpful to your conversations with your children, is by helping them understand themselves and their ID, and the fact it's possible to live in stride and to live every day fulfilled. There are people that say, well, Paul, that's why they call it a job. You're not meant to enjoy your job. Like that's their belief system. That's why we have a weekend. That's why we have a vacation every year, so we can do the things that we love. I've had people say, it's not possible to live as a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10. Like, that's just off with the fairies. You've got to get real. I mean, we're paid a wage to compensate us for the stress of working. That's life. And I'm like, well, you want to believe that and live like that? No one can stop you. That's your choice. But there are many people in the world, many of you are great shining examples of it, where we live a life that's not about the wage that we earn. You know, it's purely for the joy and the fulfillment that comes from it. But that's often one of design. Of course, there are people that just happen to fall into the right career and the right opportunities, and life goes well. But it's so much better when you're doing it with the clarity of understanding why life is working for you, because then you're more likely to be able to keep it that way. So don't leave it to a midlife crisis. And it's not that negative connotation either. I mean, when you decide to take control and design your own life in a way that's fulfilling for you and the people around you, that's not a negative thing. That's an incredibly wonderful thing. That's, you know, liberating. I mean, if a couple did that and sat down and said, hey, this is our marriage, this is our life, let's design the family life and the relationship that we want, we wouldn't call that a crisis. We'd think that was brilliant that they did that, you know, we being society. So I'd encourage everybody to, you know, approach their life that way. And yep, the pandemic, to your point, Judy, it's caused a lot of people to step back and think about, okay, you know, what do I want? Do I want to go back to working in an office and traveling to work and commuting to work every day? Or do I like this idea of working from home? I mean, that's only one question. There's lots of questions about life you could ask and decide what you want. I think it's a wonderful thing to do.
Well, can I just add there? Oh,
sorry, Susan.
I was just going to say, I've coached over 390 clients to success based on just those types of things. And a lot of them have been women around 30 going through that stage where they're wondering what's next. The other part is obviously the men going through the midlife crisis, as you said, or reassessing, you know, how did I arrive here? And the other thing that they've actually said to me when I've asked them, what is it that you actually really want? A lot of them have said, you know, no one's ever asked me that. And they've never actually asked themselves. So it's quite daunting. I find it quite amazing. But to be able to make that conscious decision when they leave school or, you know, around that time when they're teenagers, they actually do know what they want. It's just that they get derailed by outside sort of influence, you know, and it's a relief to talk to them sometimes because they actually do know.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Well, we've had people comment on this call. As I remember somebody here as recent as last week saying, I felt like I was being a naughty girl by being the way that I am, you know. Hi, Catherine.
Yes.
You know, and that's where having that personal insight to go. So I've had people say to me, so are you saying it's okay then to be like this, like my ID? And I'm like, no, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying it's imperative, you know, that if you want to live the life that's the best version of yourself, unless and until you live true to your ID, you won't experience what that's like. And by the way, a 10 out of 10 is absolutely possible each and every day to live like. Of course, you know, even in my case, I probably get to live like that most of the time, but I have days. Last week I was a little bit off color last week, but you know, you and many people do live at that very high level, but they do it with self-awareness. It's the awareness of not just knowing strengths and weaknesses, but knowing how to get back in stride and how to look at a particular situation and recalibrate it so that you know how to tackle it your way that works for you, you know? Greg, I just want to call out the comment you put in the chat is, I think, a brilliant comment. There are no small roles. There are only small actors, you know? And it's just up to each of us to change the way we show up. Are we going to show up small or larger, you know, or our full selves? I often think to myself, is this shrinking me or expanding me? And if it's shrinking me, I'm probably shrinking the people around me. If it's expanding me, you know, it's likely expanding people around me. And I think they're great little sort of check-ins to have with ourselves. It's a great comment. I love the way you've expressed that. Okay, let's move on. In terms of finding your passion, what I've just been talking about is living passionately and you know, having that sort of running through your life. And in next week's webinar, my intention is to go through and show you, for those of you who are interested, how does your ID connect to that? So for the different drives and for the, you know, collation of like when you put all the drives together for you, how does that help get a little more specific around where might your passions lie? Depending on how we go with time today, I thought I might show you an example of that so you know what to look forward to for next week. But in terms of now finding your passion, I just thought I'd share with you a few little tools that I use and I've found helpful in helping other people to do this as well. So the first one is just this one. When people are really lost, just simply saying to them, are you an inside person or an outside person? Are you a people person or are you a thing person? Just thinking of it like a little 2x2. I find some people love circles. I love circles. and putting circles together like Venn diagrams. Some people love 2x2s. I find 2x2s really helpful because they provoke insight that you wouldn't normally maybe think about. And they can also point you to what you're not good at or what you're not as passionate about as much as what you are. So for some people, they react very strongly to this exercise. Like, oh God, I'm definitely an outdoor person, you know, or they might say, I don't know that I ever meet people that say, oh, I'm definitely an inside person, but they'll say it doesn't really worry me. I'm fine working indoors. That's not a big deal. But some people react really strongly to the outdoor side. And then you say, well, are you a task or thing type person? Like, are you more into the doing, or are you more someone likes relating to people and talking and connecting with people, which might be in the more the sales side of things, you know, but people and customer service and all of that. And again, I find people have a pretty strong reaction to almost an either or here. Now, some people might make it challenging for you and say, well, I'm both, you know, and it's possible to be both. There's no one way to go here. But I do find people have a strong reaction that helps them sort of start getting some insight that, okay, I need to head over here. If I'm an inside person and I'm a people person, then okay, so that might be a sales sort of customer service area. But if someone's an outside person and more into tasks and doing, then they're probably going to go more to something outdoors, whether that's to do with animals or a trade or something hands-on that, you know, might go more in that sort of space. So just provoking the conversation to help create a direction for the conversation. I find this little tool, it's what I use often. If I was at a barbecue and someone was starting to talk to me about it, which, you know, happens often enough, not when we're in lockdown, but, you know, most of the other times, this is a little tool that I'll draw on to provoke that conversation. And the other one I did mention was, you know, kids, animals, that just, some people have a strong affinity with those two things. They'll say, I'm really into either people or kids or animals. And often the people that are into kids are also into animals. And I'll just give you the tip that often that's the case with avoid verify people, because there's no judgment from kids and animals and they can just work with them all. And so it's not so much that allows you to guess their ID, but often people that are avoid verify are drawn to that type of direction because of the lack of judgment, not just the love of the animals or of the children, but the fact that there's no judgment in that space. There's just, you know, yeah, love and positivity. Any questions or comments before we move on? Okay. So then when it comes to finding your passion, here are a couple of things you might want to think about. And I thought I'd show you this, and I'll include this in the slides so that you could maybe do some reflection on this yourselves. A lot of people are limited by money in their thinking and sensibility. And, you know, like, what would people think, or what if it would fail, and all the what ifs. I had a business coach one time say to me, don't think about the how, just focus on the what. And the how will take care of itself, the clearer you are on the what. So when you're trying to make a decision, so many people get confused by a decision. They'll say, wow, this is a really hard decision. It's like, no, the decision is easy. The how you're going to do it might be challenging, but the clearer you are on the what, the easier the how becomes. And normally the how is only challenging in the contemplation of it. It gets easier when you get into it. So the same applies with figuring this out. Don't start thinking about how you're going to do it. Remove that first and just think to yourself, okay, like that, you know, you see it on coffee mugs and so on. What would you do if no one was watching? You know, what would you sing if no one was listening, no one was watching you, and so on? Same thing here. If money was no object, if you had no fear, if you knew you couldn't fail, if there were no limits, what comes up then for you? And some people will say things that, well, you know, I'd be a radio broadcaster, but that's pointless. I mean, I don't know how to get into that, and I don't have any connection. That's all the how. And I'd say to you, just grab what it is you just said. I want to be a radio broadcaster, because it doesn't mean you need to be on a radio. That might be running a webinar like this. You know, it's not much different between being on radio and doing something like this. some people that talk about wanting to be a television presenter might actually be the equivalent of being a school teacher. You know, they're in front of an audience and they're presenting something and, you know, entertaining. So I know many people in life that I'm thinking of a friend of mine who is in the life insurance and the financial planning business. And he says, but I'm actually feel like I'm more of a life coach. That's just the decoy. That's just how I get paid. You know, when I'm out there talking to clients, I'm really there to help them with their life. And I just get paid by whatever they do with insurance and investments. So I think this is a great approach to reflect on, to remove the limitations that come into our thinking. Just think, okay, particularly money, because money is a big one. And equally, once you work on your passion, you know, you have to bring money back in and say, okay, well, I do want to raise my family and live at a certain lifestyle and so on. So how do I earn X dollars a year now from that particular area? But defining the area, I'd suggest keeping that out of it first up. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share on that? If, I mean, maybe even if they've done that themselves, or if anyone here on the call has discovered their own passion, did you go through this sort of conundrum yourself where you had to put this to one side to figure it out?
Hey, Paul.
Go, Greg.
The thing that I'm thinking of that I don't see on there, but I think you know it is, and I don't know how to phrase it, is if you couldn't disappoint anyone, and I don't want it to sound like we should go around disappointing people, but sometimes we hold ourselves back because we think, what will mom say, or what will dad say, or what will my friends say, and we become their version of us, yes, rather than our version of us. I don't know how you put that in a sentence.
Well, yeah. What do people think? I mean, how, you know this, Greg, how many people are worried, like a paranoia about what people think about them, you know, and what others will think? So that's a great call.
This is Gail, just following on from there. As a child, well, teenager anyway, my grandmother, her friend was called Dolly Lou Bell, and Dolly Lou Bell's son was my father's partner. They were in doctors together. And no matter what I did, Grandma would say, what will Dolly Lou Bell say? And it rings in my ears even now, even though I took absolutely no notice, because while I didn't know ID, you know, my ID would take no notice of what Dolly Lou Bell would say. But so many people go through that stuff. And actually, it's kind of now a family joke, but it still rings in my ears when I think about it.
Yeah. Thanks, Carl. There's some really interesting comments in the chat that I think, Mary, I just saw your comment there about if you didn't worry about judgment, what would you do? I think that's linked to what Greg was saying, you know, but it's a slightly different angle, but it's so true. I mean, people are more worried about that than they are necessarily about then what's the upside of me pursuing my passion. And by the way, the judgment piece out of I heard a talk years ago where someone said people only think about others 5% of the time. Most, like 95% of the time, they're thinking about themselves. So if they're going to think about you at all and worry about you, they've only got 5%, and they've got to fit everyone else into that 5% as well. So the amount of time they're really thinking about you is diddly squat. So get over that and just focus on what you know is best for you. I thought it was a great perspective. Just keep in mind, people are not really thinking as much about you as what you might like to think they are. You know, it's more important what you think about you. So okay, great.
So I'm just on that same note about if that means 95% of our attention is inside, it's on ourselves. It's going to be hard to find passion if you're looking inside. The passion's out there. You're not, you know, unless you're going to become a monk, which can be quite passionate. The secret is not look inside and what do I want, but look outside and what's out there, and then find what gets your attention.
Yeah, I was going to, one of the things I was going to talk about was fascination. You know, a good tip for finding your passion is to don't think of passion, think of fascination. They're linked together, but what fascinates you? You know, if you're walking through the room and something was on the TV and it grabbed your attention, what might that topic be? Where, you know, no matter how busy you are and you're running late for something, like, oh, I just need to see this, you know, what is that? And each of us, there probably is a topic, and what you can do is catch yourself out. So just observe yourself, or if you're trying to do this for someone close to you, watch what trips them up. So for example, if you find that one of your kids is every time, you know, they're distracted and so on, but when you have a particular conversation about this topic, they're always engaged, that probably gives you clues that they're fascinated by that topic. And in the fascination probably lies the pearl, you know, around the passion. But I think it's I've watched it for myself as someone who's, you know, like as passionate as all get out around human motivation. I mean, if that topic or something like that came up, like say, for example, I was walking past the TV and they said, coming up shortly, we've got so-and-so, and we're going to talk about what makes that person tick. I'm like, okay, I'm here, you know, like, I don't even know what the topic is, but the minute they say understanding what makes somebody tick, I'm in. I'd stop and I have to listen, you know? So find what fascinates you or fascinates others. And that's a good clue so I'm just looking at someone who I know really well, who's a nurse, and it may not be nursing, it may be helping people, or it may be a particular field within nursing that fascinates you. What is that? You know, and that will help give you that guidance. But I think that word fascination, it's a really, what's the word? It stirs people. It causes a chemical reaction in many people. I haven't known enough yet to know, is it linked to a certain ID? But I haven't had that reaction. I found it to be, it feels like it's, you know, universally applicable to all IDs, that it provides an insight to helping them find their passion.
Well, can I just say something? I find too that if you ask, and somebody may have said this, I don't know, but I didn't hear. Find something that you're really angry about or really against, and often your passion is the opposite to that. It's actually
that's a great call too.
Feeling strongly about it.
That's really good. That's the flip side. Thanks, Joe.
Could I just add to?
Go, Susan.
I was just going to say, it's interesting to note what you are naturally doing in your spare time. You know, what movies you might watch, what magazines you might pick up. What is it that you're naturally gravitating towards in your spare time when you've got nothing to do? So, well,
not just nothing to do, but even when you have a lot to do, and you say, this weekend I'm going to do all these things, and you know, I'm just thinking to myself here, and you don't do them, but you gravitate to something else, like that holds clues, you know. Even if it was going and instead of doing all the things on the list, you went and watched some movies, it's not necessarily the movie, it's what does the movie represent for you, you know. That might hold the key. But that plays out too, I think, when you know there's things that you said you were going to do that, you know, you should be doing, and you still don't do them, and instead you were drawn to something else, you know, what that gives clues as well.
Could I just give an example? My daughter is a 70 incomplete. And when she was a little girl, she was addicted to the Sims game. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's where the Sims game, it was actually a game where you could put all the different pieces into homes and the families and work out exactly what she wanted in an ideal situation in a home. And it was really fascinating because now she's an interior designer.
Ah.
Yeah.
There you go.
What attracted her as a little girl is obviously what was the thread running through for her to be an interior designer now as a completer.
Right. Ah, interesting.
It is,
yeah. Amanda's just saying here she loved that game.
Yes.
Similar ID. Okay. Anyone else? I could see a bunch of people wanted to say something before, so that's why I was just to encourage you if you had something you wanted to share, particularly if you have had a story like what Susan just shared that validates it. Okay, the last point I was going to share with you was in terms of finding your passion and living passionately. You know, some people say, do the feelings come first or do the behavior comes first? And really they both go together. So instead of having the knowledge, if you actually started doing what passionate people do, that might start to provoke things as well. So when you think yourself, what do passionate people do? You know, and I just made a couple of notes here. I'm not saying these are the be all and end all, But when I just reflected on what passionate people do, typically they're early starters. Not every one of them. I'm just saying these are common elements. They tend to do the tough things first. They don't put them off. There's a Stephen Covey in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of his tenets was, put the big rocks in first. If you haven't heard that story, what he's saying is, if you had a jar and you had to fill that jar with rocks, everything from big rocks to smaller rocks, all the way up to little grains of sand. If you put the sand in first and then the pebbles and then the smaller rocks, there won't be room for the big rocks at the end. But if you put the big rocks in the jar first and then the next size and the next size, you'll be able to then put the sand in and it'll fill all the cracks and it will all fit. But you have to start with the big rocks first. And I find that really true in life. And the people that tend to be passionate about whatever they're doing, I think that's a common denominator. Volunteerism, as opposed to playing victim, is a big characteristic, I think, of people that live passionately. Lifting when others are tiring. I always remember years ago when I was working with a group of elite swimmers, Ian Thorpe was in the squad. I didn't coach him personally, but he was one of the squad, and I was working with a bunch of the others. And when they have to do training, and they're doing all the laps, they have a set that, like a pull set, that they would do in the training session. When everyone else would get tired, that was when Ian said, once I start hurting, that's when I start training. For those of you who don't know Ian Thorpe, he was one of our famous swimmers here in Australia and obviously well known around the world at the 2000 Olympics and so on. But he had a really interesting angle to all of his training. When you say to him, if you had to do, when you're doing your push-ups, if you were doing 100 push-ups, which is the hardest push-up to do, the first or the 100th? His answer was the 101st. It was one of those angles of pushing yourself and lifting when you felt like you near the end. It was lifting and showing initiative. So my thought around this was, you can either wait to find your passion, and then by finding that passion and being passionate, you start to exhibit these behaviors, or you start doing the behaviors and you'll probably find the feelings and the insights come along for the ride after that. I think it would work just as well. At times in my life, I've tried it. It's worked for me. Just deciding to be that way, and then the feeling and the motivation come along. Anyone have anything they would like to share relevant to that, or about maybe what you've done finding your own passion, living passionately?
Yeah, Paul, if I think about what I've done, there's always been a common denominator for me. It's always been about other people, whether it's to do with picking myself up when I'm feeling like crap, or whether I'm that real drive to help. I didn't like the word help for a long time because I felt like it was an enabling or anyway, I thought it was the context around it, that it was a negative term, but I've come back to that and recognized that it's about other people, not about me. And so it's whenever I'm feeling unmotivated or feeling like I'm not living in stride or whatever that is, it's generally because it's not about people, and it's too much focused on myself, or I'm doing something that's isolated from people. So the purpose that I have is to make a difference to it's basically the purpose I have is to make a difference to myself and others by the conversations we have. So having conversations that make a difference to myself and others is the way I usually have it. So, and that's when I feel that I do my best, when I'm with my clients and even my friends and my loved ones.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you.
That reminds me, I've had over my career, a lot of people saying, man, you're so passionate. Boy, you sure are. Where's your energy and all that? And when they say those things to me, I go, huh? Like, I don't sit there and going, I'm passionate. I'm going to be passionate today. I'm just in it so much in the moment that it exudes out. And then when they say that to me, I go, oh, really? And I actually kind of leave it for a moment to contemplate what I've done that's made that energy. They say, where do you get your energy from? And my answer now is, well, from you. You know, I'm getting my passion from this experience, it's not something coming in from inside me, you know?
Yes, and I think, Greg, it's not necessarily a physical energy that they're picking up on. You know, one of the things, I remember when people first said that to me, and I guess I associated passion with a level of physicalness, you know, a physiology aspect. But I think they're reading a whole of self energy, you know, and the congruency of being true to self is, I think, projects some level of mental energy or a chemistry that people are looking at, sort of going, I want that. That what I'm really saying is I want some of that. How did you get that? Because I want that for me too, you know. Jose, you've raised your hand.
When I was at work, a colleague informed me that he'd been approached as a referee for a job that I was going for. And he told me that he'd promoted me by saying that I was very passionate, that I'm so passionate that if there was a pin that dropped on carpet, I'd be on it going, oh, check that out, look at that. And it struck me because, like Greg, I was oblivious to this. I'm just being me. I'm just doing what I do. And that's when I realized that he was saying this as a positive because this is what other people value. And I didn't even know. Like I'm just being me, you know, and I'm sure most of us out there are the same. So I agree with Greg.
Yeah. Yeah. So often it's you know, I think in how you see yourself, you know, and when you're not as in stride, then what you're searching for is what you see in others when they are more in stride than you know, like that 9 or 10 energy. And so much of it is first, that's why I started with that, first and foremost about getting in stride yourself. And then, you know, that's like probably 80%, and then go from there. There is more beyond that, but I think that's a hell of a place to start. And the rest of it will seem hollow and probably always be elusive to you if you don't put that, you know, big rock in place first, which is being in stride in how you show up each and every day.
Paul, can I ask an overview question just quickly? If you were to say to someone who, you know, has got a limited time or space or whatever the case may be, the top tips for getting in stride, because that is obviously doing the sort of work that is suited to your ID, etc. But what would you say are the top ways of getting in stride overall?
I might let others answer that first, and then I'll sort of share for me too. I have an answer for you, but I don't want to block the value of this group. So does anyone have anything they'd like to share?
It's Gail here. Can I say something? Because as a 4229, it was even said by that lovely man, whose name I've forgotten, from Block, how on earth could you be an accountant? Now, I love being an accountant. I have a passion for what I do, but I am not your typical accountant. I have made running an accountancy practice work for me by surrounding myself with the right people so I can do my thing, which is the talking to people, the consulting, the helping them get their life in order, and actually sitting down playing with books and computers. Yes, I do, because obviously you have to, but it's not about finding the right job, because I'm quite sure if anyone had said to me in a career counselling thing with my ID, be an accountant, I would have dropped off my chair because nobody would. So it's about making it, for me, it's about making it work for me, because I'm a bloody good accountant anyway, but I make that every day fun. I love it. I couldn't think of doing anything else. And I just, I wouldn't change what I do for the world.
Thanks,
so,
Joe.
Yep.
Thank you. Well, I'm just conscious of time, Angela. So the first thing that came up for me the minute you asked that question was to meet your needs, to be aware of what your needs are from your drive, you know, in terms of getting in stride. It's as simple, it's as simple and as complex as meeting your needs, but the needs are simple, you know, they're outlined for you. We have a template. I'm sure when you did the certification program, you would have seen it. But but just because we can say, here's what they are, now you've got to actually apply them, you know, and that's where the gold is okay, how do I do that? Like if I need purpose in my life, or if I use your case, if you need positivity in your life, then how do I turn each of these things into positivity? And where there's negativity, how do I eliminate that? That's where there might be some work, but the needs provide the clues for you to get in stride. And the second answer that I had that I'll just share with you was purely and simply to believe that it's possible to live like that, because there are still many people that don't believe that it's possible to live in stride, and you can choose to believe it and decide to live it. It'd be like if someone says, well, you know, I want to be fit and healthy, and I know it's possible to live without illness, so I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to exercise every day to do it. That's a choice you make, regardless of the weather or whatever. And so I think making the decision to show up as your best each and every day, they're just some, you know, some people do choose, and it is a choice and a decision to live like that, and others haven't quite got there yet. So the people that to me are doing it best have consciously made that decision. I want to show up best for myself and for everyone else around me as well, each and every day. That's the decision. And then meet your needs.
Give yourself permission to do that. Awesome.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Definitely. So guys, thank you very much for being on the call. Next week, we'll dig into this topic again, but bringing in the ID as to, okay, for certain IDs, how do you do that? I think that'll be fascinating. So I'm going to send some questions out to you to think about in preparation, those of you who are coming, or as people sign up, and I look forward to a really engaging conversation with you next week. Meanwhile, stay in stride, have a great week, and we'll see you all again next week. Take care, everyone.
Bye.